Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government has been called the most right-wing government since the country's inception. And in the midst of Israel's war on Gaza, which is now in its 7th month, the pull of the far-right agenda has left a pronounced mark on the manner in which the war is being conducted. But the Israeli public's discontent with its government is growing, as are the divisions within Netanyahu's cabinet itself. So, what lies ahead? Here to speak with us about it is journalist and editor of Israeli news site Local Call, Orly Noy joins us on UpFront. Orly, thank you so much for joining us. Israel seems to be preparing for a full-scale invasion of the southern city of Rafah. Meanwhile, tensions continue to mount between members of the government, with many from the far right urging the prime minister to ignore international pressure to call off a further assault on the city of Rafah. There have been numerous times when the disagreements have come out into the public. They've been airing their disagreements in the public sphere. How deep right now are the cracks in the Israeli government?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a very problematic composition of a government, and the disagreements are quite deep, but not deep enough to really threaten Netanyahu's government, at least not at this point. It is very obvious that Gantz and his camp are very much not satisfied with the way that Netanyahu has been handling the war. And they are very much aware of the growing public pressure to end the war, not because the Israeli public is so much worried with the horrifying massacre that Israel has been conducting in Gaza, but rather because there is a growing understanding among the Israeli public that there is actually no way to bring back those among the hostages that are still alive and those who are not without ending the war. But on the other hand, Netanyahu is very much a hostage, so to speak, in the hands of the extremists in his government, people like Itamar Ben-Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich, Orit Stork, and so that very clearly threaten to break up the government if Netanyahu backs down from a full-fledged attack on Rafah that seems to be approaching.
You raise an important point here. Benjamin Netanyahu's position as prime minister is directly linked. It's beholden to, hostage to use your language, his political alliances with the far right, people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. But that's what Netanyahu's always been good at, managing those alliances and doing what's necessary to stay in office. Does that continue?
I think that Netanyahu got too caught up with the self-image of himself as this, in Hebrew, he's very often referred to as the magician, the political magician that can always, make his way through the most difficult of political circumstances. I don't think that this is the case anymore. There hasn't been a single reliable public opinion poll that shows any degree of public satisfaction with his conduct as prime minister, with the way he's been handling the war. So, at the best scenario for Netanyahu, we are talking only to enable him to finish that term. There is no political future for Netanyahu. This is quite clear for everybody. I'm not sure he's understanding it, but there is no way around it. He will not be able to form a government following the next election.
Let me ask you a question about that, because we keep talking as if Netanyahu is gesturing to the right and appealing to the right out of political expediency. But why are we not to believe that he actually is the right-wing extremist that he aligns himself with, and he only appears moderate to get more widespread acceptance? I mean, who is Netanyahu at the core?
Honestly, I don't think, for me personally, It doesn't really matter. Does it matter if a person is promoting fascist, racist, supremacist policies because he truly believes in them, or just to accommodate his political partners? I don't think that this is very relevant. The fact is that Netanyahu has been promoting extremely all of those policies, and not only vis-a-vis Gaza. You see that Netanyahu has been shooting, to all directions. He's been provoking the situation in the north. He's been provoking the situation vis-a-vis Iran. He has been promoting an extreme anti-democratic conduct against the Palestinian citizens of Israel. There is a growing persecution, a McCarthyistic persecution of not only Palestinian citizens, but also of Jewish activists or anybody who, expresses any horror vis-a-vis what's going on in Gaza, or speaking about genocide. So, if this is really the person or just his political persona, I don't think that there is difference anymore. It makes any difference at this point.
Speaking of the far right has been very vocal in Israel over the last week, particularly after President Biden announced that he wouldn't be sending any more weapons to Israel if they were going to be used in a ground invasion in Rafah. Now, of course, since that announcement, Biden has agreed to send other stuff to, billions of dollars or over $1 billion in aid to Israel. So it was a short-lived moment of frustration for the right. But nevertheless, when it happened, Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir tweeted, "Hamas loves Biden. Hamas heart Biden," in response. When you see this type of rhetoric coming out of the Israeli government and aimed at Israel's top ally, the United States, when critics would argue the U.S. has done very little to rein in Israel during this time, how does that impact the international standing of Israel?
There is no question that Israel is at the most difficult position regarding its international position since its establishment 76 years ago. There is no doubt about that. We are losing grounds not only with our biggest ally, the United States, but also with the Arab countries with whom we have peace treaties, and they are burning all of the political bridges of Israel with the world. Far-right ministers in the cabinet have no regards for Israel's international status. They are really searching for something fundamentally different to be achieved through chaos, through Armageddon. And Netanyahu is really a captive right now in their hands.
Netanyahu doesn't have to call for elections until October of 2026. But there's still been a mounting pressure for all the reasons you've mentioned for him to schedule early elections. He, of course, has dismissed these demands, arguing that Israel is at war and that elections would essentially, to use his language, paralyze hostage negotiations, and that it would bring an end to the war before the goals are completely achieved. How do you respond to this argument from Netanyahu that effectively he's not going to call for early elections, which is what the people want, because it would undermine the stability and growth of the country?
Look, I think that following October 7th and the horror and the shock and the rage that the Israeli public felt, Netanyahu knew that he had to do something drastic. And I think that in a way he thought that a massive massacre would ease the sense of revenge that was very much existing among the Israeli public, and therefore in that way reduce the political pressure that he was under. But the thing is that he promised the Israeli public things that he could never fulfill. Two things. One is the return of the hostages, and the second is the ultimate victory, the final victory, the absolute victory, which nobody really has any idea what it's supposed to look like. The vagueness of this term, the final or the absolute victory, allows the far right to think or to imagine the absolute victory as the final annihilation of Gaza Strip. And we should really be aware of that there are people in Israel, not so few, that understand the Israeli victory as the ultimate annihilation of the Gaza Strip. And this, among other, is what brought us to the International Court of Justice.
Orly Noy, I want to thank you so much for joining me on UpFront.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.